It's my honor now to introduce tonight's featured speaker, Dr. Michelle Asha Cooper, Vice President of Lumina Foundation. Michelle Asha Cooper leads the development and implementation of state and federal policy initiatives for the Lumina Foundation, an independent private foundation in Indianapolis that is committed to making opportunities for learning beyond high school available to all. She works to advance the foundation's support for today's students at community colleges and four-year colleges and universities. Dr. Cooper brings a wealth of experience, a deep devotion to students, an acute understanding of policymaking at all levels, and is just an all-around great person. As an accomplished leader, role model, and advocate for women, we are delighted to have Dr. Michelle Asha Cooper as tonight's featured speaker. Now, tonight's format is less of a keynote and more of a conversation, and I'm also delighted to welcome a member of ACE's Women's Network Executive Council to lead that conversation. Dr. Mary Churchill currently serves as the Associate Dean for Strategic Initiatives and Community Engagement at Boston University Wheelock. In this role, she manages strategic partnerships, including the college's relationship with Boston Public Schools, where she represents the college at BPS Community Equity Roundtable convenings. Dr. Churchill also serves as Program Director for Higher Education Administration at BU and teaches in that program as well. In her work with ACE's Women's Network, Dr. Churchill constantly demonstrates her passion for and commitment to supporting and advocating for the next generation of women leaders in higher education. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege, my pleasure, to introduce to some and others to welcome these two distinguished women. Please join me in welcoming them.
So, Soraya, what a tough act to follow. That was amazing. Thank you. What an honor. And Michelle and I have been with the Women's Network all day in leadership conversations. And so to be up here in conversation with you is phenomenal. And it's been a high emotion day, right?
Yeah, I honestly feel like we could have gone home after the last one. No, really, I am truly humbled and honored to be able to come after you. Like, that just means the world to me. You and Donna Shavlik, you're my heroes, my goodness.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But you're an amazing woman, too. And so let's start with some of your story, right?
Okay.
Your journey. It's been pretty phenomenal, and I want to hear more, and I want everyone here to hear more. And I also want to hear what motivates you to keep going, because times are tough. I often say that higher ed is a sector under siege, and media's after us, it's tough.
Yeah.
We know we need to do the work, but it's tough. So.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you all for being here tonight. It's great to look out and see all of your faces smiling back at me. That is very energizing at this time of night when I am typically preparing for bed. So this is great. I've been doing this work for about 2 decades now, and this is the first time I have ever been invited to speak at ACE. So Dr. Mitchell, your staff, thank you. Thank you for making this possible. I have been here all day, and it has been great to be a part of this leadership forum. It's been really pretty, I would say, sort of like refreshing. Hearing the stories of so many of the women today, we don't typically see each other, but our stories are very, very similar. And in terms of what my journey is, I have to start at the beginning. I am a very proud native of Charleston, South Carolina. My story starts there, and my story constantly returns there. Now, I did leave South Carolina because I just had to leave South Carolina. But I go back. And, you know, my values are centered on family and faith, community, the fellowship of others. I had parents who were servant leaders. My mother was, you know, very active in the community. She was a nurse. My dad was a civil rights leader and organizer, and that was my upbringing. Now, growing up, I just thought these were the people I lived with. Right. I didn't realize that they were pouring something into me, but they obviously did. And that has sort of been a critical part of my trajectory. My first job was at a college. I worked at King's College in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And I was a campus practitioner working in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion 20 years ago. Wow. And then I came to DC because I really, really wanted to be here in DC. And I worked at 2 associations. The first was AAC&U. And the other one, I see my AAC&U friends right there. And the other one was CIC, Council for Independent Colleges. I have also led a research policy think tank, Institute for Higher Education Policy. I stayed there for about 12 and a half years. And I've worked in government 2 times. First time as a career staffer during the Bush administration, and then most recently as a political appointee in the Biden-Harris administration. You're probably thinking like, oh, I've just sort of done a lot. But you know, the thing is there's some commonalities and some through lines. Like my work has always been centered on students and has always been centered on low-income, first-generation students of color. That has been a through line throughout my career. Everything I've done, everything I've touched, that's where it goes back to. And that's what motivates me. Yeah. Yeah. That's why I do the work. That was me at one point in my life. I was that student. And when I think about the friends that did not make it out of South Carolina, I'm doing this for them and all the ones like them, and so that others can have opportunity. I would say out of all of those jobs, all of them have been great. And even the one I have now is really fantastic. But being able to serve our nation during a time of national crisis will always be a hallmark of my career. So my most recent stint at the U.S. Department of Education will always be very, very special to me.
So we both served in government during the pandemic, and we had this amazing conversation yesterday about that work. I was chief of policy in the city of Boston in 2021, and Michelle was on the other side of this, at the federal level. For me, this was probably the most intense work I've ever done. We were getting vaccinations out, we were reopening schools. It was 24/7, and it was just nonstop, but you truly, I said, I'm not a savior, I don't have a savior complex, but we were truly saving lives. And so that resonated with both of us. And so tell us a little, you were giving money to these folks, right?
Yeah, did anyone here get a higher education emergency relief fund? Anybody?
That was her.
Well, I oversaw $80 billion when I was at the U.S. Department of Education. The only thing that could have made that better is that I had actually seen the money. But I got to see the fruits of that money by the work that you all did on your campuses and the ways that you serve students. So $76 billion of that $80 billion was because of the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund. The remainder of those programmatic funds were to support grants to historically black colleges and universities, tribal colleges, Hispanic serving institutions, a host of programs like the Fulbright programs. And I also had the pleasure of overseeing regulations, which are not too sexy and appealing, but very, very, very important, I think. And accreditation. So I got to touch a lot, and I had a staff of 200 people, and when I got there, they were all remote. And when you would log on to meetings, nobody had their cameras on, right? You couldn't see anybody's faces. So it was interesting to connect with people. You had to work harder to connect. And there were several sort of takeaways from that moment. I think one of the main takeaways was I really feel like higher education showed up for students. You know, sometimes we get a bad rap of being slow and inflexible, but during a moment of crisis, you were very, very adaptive, you were nimble, and you moved really, really fast. Yeah. And you put the money to good use. You put the money to good use. 18 million students got direct financial aid support. I used to get letters from college presidents who said, if it had not been for these dollars, I may have had to lay off my faculty. We might have had to close our doors. I even got a note one time from a parent who said that she thought that it was a hoax that her son had gotten his institutional balance wiped out. And then when she found out that it was because of these dollars, she had to send us a note. So I just think that what you did was amazing, and I want you to keep doing it, okay? Like, let's just keep doing it. Like, that's gonna be really important. We gotta keep doing it, because you've shown that you can do it. So we gotta keep being adaptive and creative and nimble and finding really innovative ways to serving our students and meeting them at their moment of need, because there's still a lot of need. Even though masks are now off and restrictions are lifted, there are very true lingering effects of this pandemic. And if anything, the pandemic put a spotlight on the inequities in our system, and it then opened up those inequities to even more students. So we got a lot of work to still do, but I do think we need to celebrate how good you showed up. The second thing that I was a takeaway from that moment is that I realized that, you know, civil servants kind of get a bad rap. Yeah, people have like this impression of government workers, and I found these people to be amazing, amazing. They work so hard, they are so committed. The same things that you want, desire, and value for yourselves and for your students, they want, desire, and value for them too. And they are working. Like, there was nothing I ever asked the staff in the Department of Education to do that they did not figure out a way to do. Now, sometimes they looked at me crazy, and sometimes they might have had to turn their camera off, because I finally got them to turn the cameras on. Like, you know, but they did it. They figured it out, and they were right in the trenches with me. And they were living through the pandemic, too. You know, they were living through it in real time. So I just walked away with such immense respect for what it means to be a public service, and so much gratitude for the people who are doing that job each and every day. And then the third thing I learned during the pandemic, I learned a lot about me. Yeah, I did. I learned a lot about me. It is so appropriate that we just heard Maya Angelou's poem, I Rise, Still I Rise. I am not joking you when I tell you that there were moments at that job, and I loved the job. I loved the job, but the job was hard.
And you love DC.
And I love DC, and I love higher ed. I love Secretary Cardone. I love so much about it, but it was hard. It was hard. I would walk into meetings saying, I am the hope and the dream of the slave. And that was what got me through. Like, you know, I'm from South Carolina, so the vestiges of slavery are very real in South Carolina. You can see plantations, you can visit them. So I understood the impact of slavery. I understood the resilience of the people who I come from. I understood what it means to be a survivor. And so here I am. If they did that, then I can do this. That's what my mind would tell me, but I had to pump myself up sometimes, right? And so, you know, I always would say representation matters, but representation only matters if you're going to speak, if you're going to have a voice. And sometimes having a voice I was afraid, I felt risky, it felt uncomfortable, but I knew I was there for a season and a purpose, and I did my absolute best to use that time wisely. So that's my time in government during the pandemic. And I was sad when I left.
It's like a cult.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Like, I've never worked harder. I've never gotten paid less for working so hard. Yet I was sad when I left.
It's a rush, right? Because you're doing so much, and you can do it instantly, and the impact is bigger impact than you've ever had. So it is phenomenal. So that now you are at Lumina.
That's right.
So how did you get here, and what's this about?
So, Lumina Foundation, I've worked with Lumina Foundation for many, many years. And like many of you probably know about Lumina, and Lumina is a private foundation. We are headquartered in Indianapolis, but we also have a DC office, which is where I'm based out of. And we are committed to increasing college attainment. And we have various strands of work. We probably work with many of you in this room to support efforts that are replicable, scalable solutions for helping students get across that finish line into college, the space of college completion. And we are motivated by this big goal that we are seeking to reach by goal 2025 of increasing attainment to 60%. And our most recent data showed that we were at 53.7%. Now, we're not quite at 60, but we started at 37.5, so we're clearly making progress. And we're making progress because of the work many of you are doing. I finally, Lumina had been approaching me for a while, and I had said no because I could not imagine leaving government. Like, we had so much going on. It was the pandemic. We had regulation. Did any of you hear John's presentation earlier today when he had the federal government update? Anybody was there? Yeah, okay. So I was listening carefully because a lot of that stuff he was talking about was stuff that I did. I'm like, what is John about to say? He gave a very honest and measured assessment of how things really have been working in Washington. I appreciated that. It was really great to hear his overview. But I felt guilty about leaving because there's so much work that needed to be done. But Lumina kept coming, and they said, look, Michelle, you can still do all that work just from a different perch. And then I realized, and Lumina has money. So I'm like, I had this like Robin Hood, I can do like a lot of good with these people's money. And so that's really that's what I seek to do. Like, I want to make sure that from this particular point in my career, I've made a lot of connections. I've seen what works. I understand what doesn't. I'm committed to trying to make things better, trying to find the right solutions. And it feels kind of good to be doing it from a foundation who is committed to those same values.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So switching gears a little,
Yep.
kind of backing up, but talking about women's leadership and women on campus. What have you learned about women students and women leaders on campus?
When you think about our campuses, you think about our communities, you think about our workforce, women are the backbone of that. We have been the majority in these spaces for quite some time. Yet we are not the majority in leadership in these spaces yet. Now, we are making great gains, and I'm really encouraged by, for example, the number of women presidents who are here. I was so excited when I saw the announcement of the new incoming president of Harvard. It's great to see these women assume leadership roles. It's great to see women of color assuming leadership roles, but I do worry that we are entering into these spaces and the values and the expectations and the norms, they were created by and for men. And I don't know if they've changed just yet. And that's a concern of mine. And when I think about women students on our campuses, I think their existence is very fragile too. We have more low-income women at for-profit institutions. Mm-hmm. More women have degrees or taking on degrees that they enter into the job market. They are the lowest paid. Yep. Now, these are important jobs. They should not be the lowest paid. Teachers, social workers, they should not be the lowest paid. They are essential occupations. Yet we still devalue them in the labor market. And I think about student loan debt, which is an issue that I spend a lot of my time thinking about. I worked in the Biden administration. I spent a lot of time thinking about student loan debt. But women are the majority of student loan debt holders. So the gains are real. I'm excited that we are enrolled in college. I'm excited that many of us are completing college. I'm excited that so many of you are in leadership roles, whether it's the presidency or the provost or other spaces. But the gains are fragile, and I do worry about that. And I do worry that we have not changed the values and the systemic issues and environments that we are operating in. I worry about that.
I worry about it every day.
Yeah.
Right?
No, but I have felt encouraged by this today. I really did. Because it shows that, there's a community out there. Like sometimes when I do this work, I'm doing this work by myself. Like I'm in a very male-centered field. But hearing your stories, I'm like, oh, maybe I just need to get out and meet some other women. You need to come to these events more often. Because usually, if I get invited to speak, I don't always get to spend the day at the event. And this has been a real treat.
So what about you? Have you ever thought of doing this college president thing?
Have I thought about doing it? Yes. That's the short answer. But I haven't, I've kind of taken myself out of that game. And let me tell you why. I have applied for a college presidency twice. But I'm a policy person. I did start my career on campus. So when search committees see me, they are often intrigued by me, but they absolutely never hire me. Never. And so after going through that song and dance a few times, I contacted the search firm, and I said, can you just give me some feedback about how I show up in these searches? And they said all the nice things that you say to people when you're rejecting them, right? And I was like, okay, that's great. Can you tell me the truth now? And I'm really grateful. This person told me the truth, at least from their vantage point. And I was told that I had not come up through the traditional ranks. I had not been a faculty member and then an administrator and a provost. So even though they found my credentials and experience impressive, they just didn't really know how to situate me in that grid that you have for the search criteria. They just didn't really know what to do with me. And I said, oh, well, that's interesting. And she said, oh, Michelle, that's the other thing you might want to know. You talk very openly about your family and that you're a single mom. You might not want to do that because there were some on the search committee who were concerned about that. So now y'all should not be shocked by that. You heard these stories earlier today. I clearly am not the only person who has had that experience. Now, some of the women who shared it earlier today were talking about they had it in the 90s, in the early 2000s. This was a conversation with me in 2019. So that just shows that behind closed doors, we have not made as much progress, and we may not be yet as progressive as we think we might are. Or should be, yeah.
Yep. Thank you for
So
sharing.
I've taken myself out. I'm not looking to be a president. I'm fine right where I am.
Oh, you've got time.
I'm good.
I mean, I think that's an important story to share in this room. You've got time. I'll see you as a president one of these days. Definitely. Higher ed.
I still have not had a traditional experience, and I still am a single mom,
well,
so I'm good.
Well, you bring up the pipeline issue, and we talked yesterday about that we all know of so many men who came from the corporate sector for government and did not have a traditional pathway, right? But for women, the expectation that it's a traditional pipeline pathway is so much stronger. And so we have to break that barrier, and we have to think differently about multiple pipelines to the presidency for women.
Yeah.
So definitely. So let's switch back to Lumina, because we've been having this fantastic conversation around there's only so much you can do in government, and the need for, we both realized in government that we're actually more advocates than you're allowed to be in government, and that you can do more from a foundation. You can do more partnering and coalition building. So talk a little bit about that and how that's a freer space and how you can provide cover for folks who maybe need that cover.
Yeah, that was one of the interesting things in government. I sometimes felt out of place because I really wasn't political at all. I was an advocate. Like, I'm an advocate at heart, but I was operating in this political space. And then I just realized that, we have people who are political. So let them be political, let me be an advocate, and life worked out really, really well. And we complemented each other. And I think that's what we often need to do in our jobs, is figure out, like, what's your strength, what's my strength, how do we come together and complement each other? And I feel like that's what I can do from Lumina's perch, right? Like, I am out here looking at the various pieces of this higher education ecosystem and saying, okay, this is where we can lay down the gauntlet on this particular issue, this is where these individuals have strengths, and how do we bring it all together for transformation, for truly advancing a reform agenda. And so from the foundation, we really are always looking for good ideas. We are looking for innovations. We are looking at it from research. We can create platforms, and give people like a bully pulpit. We can help create and build coalitions, bringing diverse perspectives and people together for a common goal and common good. And right now, there's so much happening in the world, in our states, in our communities. What I've been told by many is that, they need help. And people are afraid to speak out because speaking out presents very real danger to them and their livelihoods. And so we're hearing that. And we're trying to think about, like, how can we support the good work that we know people are doing it. Like, regardless if you tell them they can't say diversity or equity, they are still committed to the work. And I applaud them for that, for being able to, like, stay in these environments and do, like, this important mission-centered work, but they need help. And so from the vantage point of an organization like Lumina, I do feel like we are in a very privileged position because, one, yes, we have money, but also we're not getting our hands dirty.
Yeah.
We're not fighting the fight in the trenches, so at least we can figure out ways to support those who are. And so that's one of the things that is top of mind for this moment right now. Like, how do we figure out ways, and if you have ideas, I'm certainly open to it, like, to help our communities and our states who are in real crisis. And I was writing, one day I, started to, like, scribble down, like, what are the issues facing higher education? And within, like, 2 minutes, I had, like, 10 things. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't think we have enough money to fight all of these battles. But, this moment feels different. Like, I think we have had hard times in higher ed before, and we've bounced back. This time feels a little different, and I think we've got to do more strategizing and coordinating if we really want to come through this one successfully. And so hopefully I can do that from Lumina.
And coalition building, right?
Yeah, coalition building.
And the idea or the practice of taking risk and who can take risk.
And
right?
we can take risks.
Right.
Being at a foundation, we're in a little bit of a better position to take some risks. Now, we have to be careful too. We have guidance and rules we have to follow. But compared to some of our friends and partners and colleagues, I think we are in a position to take more risk, and I hope that we will. I'm pretty sure we will. We have a president who's just as committed to this stuff as I am, which is great.
Well, he hired you, right?
Yeah.
So let's, in preparing for this, I downloaded her dissertation, I watched some of her speeches online, read some of the great work. And one concept that kept coming up again and again was this idea of resiliency. And so why was that a through line through your work? And how does that relate to hope for you?
Yeah, I don't think I even realized that until you told me that. But I do think that, I come from a community of people who are resilient. And I stand on that. Like, that is why I exist. That is why I'm able to do what I do, because I know that is my foundation. And, helping higher education through this moment of crisis, through this pandemic, I got to talk to so many college leaders, got a chance to visit so many campuses, talk to your students, And the themes of resilience came up over and over and over again. Like I would meet students, and these students had no knowledge of me, had never met me before, but they would come to me and tell their story because I think they just needed to tell their story, and they just download it. And you could see the trauma, you could feel the loss, you could just feel all the pains of the pandemic upon them. But in the midst of that, they had still persisted. They had still gone to school every day. They might have been couch surfing with a kid, but they still went to school every day. They logged on. And I think that those are the stories we don't celebrate enough. We don't celebrate, we just move on to the next crisis and just say, oh, we got to fix this problem, or oh, these gaps. And those problems are very real. But I do want folks to stop and realize that your students who are persisting are resilient. Even the ones that you may have lost during the pandemic, and I know you lost many, some of them are coming back. That's resilience. The fact that the colleges have survived during the pandemic, that you were able to lead, how hard was that? I just think that we are very resilient, but we never stop and give ourselves credit for being the survivors of these experiences. And I just feel strongly that we should. Now, we still got to fix some new problems. There's still other work to do, but I just felt like that was something I clearly saw and experienced and heard time and time again over those 22 months, especially when I was working in the Biden administration.
Well, and that's what keeps you going, right?
That is what keeps me going. I just truly believe, one of the students, I met a student at North Carolina Central University. And we went there and we held a mental health forum, and he had an opportunity to talk to Secretary Cardona, and he made us promise that we weren't going to forget about them. I'm like, we won't, and I won't.
Right.
I won't. And even though I don't work for Secretary Cardona anymore, sometimes I call him up and remind him, you can't forget about that student. And he's great, he won't either. But we will not forget those stories because they were heart-wrenching, they were very touching, they were very moving. And if that student can get up every day and show up for class and come to this meeting with some people from DC and tell their stories, then I can use my talents, skills, and expertise to show up for him too. That's just the way I see it.
Thank you. So I think we have time for questions. If we've got mics in the room, I think. I see Hunter going towards the microphones. Okay. Can we get a microphone? Here she comes. Okay.
Go on the other side.
You are right behind the podium. That's why. Thank you, Ted.
I think it's on. Oh, yeah, it is. Hi, I'm Artis. I'm from Windward Community College in Hawaii, Kaneohe. And you mentioned being single mom. And in my state, being a single mother is the single largest predictor of poverty. 80% of single mothers, 22% of all children in my state. What are we doing nationally to address single mothers and their needs for higher education?
That's a great question. I think in terms of policies, I don't think that there are any policies that are singling out single mothers per se, but there's a lot of good research that is looking at the realities of being low-income women broadly, for example, which includes single mothers. Like I think about the Institute for Women's Policy Research, they've done great work. And there's been a really huge focus, I think, coming out of the pandemic that speaks to basic needs support. And that is a plight, where there's hunger and homelessness, transportation. And those are things that affect not just single mothers, but low-income students generally. And so there is a big policy discussion going on around basic needs, going on around low-income students in poverty. And for our purposes at Lumina, we're focused on all of that, and we're looking at ways to look at how do we leverage the federal dollars that we get through like the Pell Grant and things of that nature, and braid them together with funding from other agencies, whether that is TANF dollars or other sources of funds that could help to support students. And when you add them all together, you get a little bit more than what you would get if you just had one single pot. But you know, because that's a hat and an experience that I wear, you know, I just try to always be cognizant of that community as well. Like, what does it mean to be a working mother going to school? I didn't have to do that, but I have to be a working mother who goes to work. Like, my kid is in the hotel right now because I couldn't leave her at home. Like, she had to come here, you know, so just like, and I think that's what our students face. Like, you can't leave them at home, they gotta come to school. So I really recognize that my own experience is how does this project onto students? And from where I sit, how can I be more of an advocate and a vocal support for them through the work that I do? That's another thing I'm doing for these low-income women. Trying to.
Hi, I'm Marta Garcia Murillo, Dean of the College of Information Science and Technology, University of Nebraska, Omaha. You were in the Biden administration for a little bit, and I'm really worried that our policymakers are beginning to question the value of education. And I wonder, what do you think could be the language that we can use to make them recognize how important, how transformational education still is?
Okay, so I want to make sure I answer your question. So you are worried that policymakers are looking at the value of education?
And that they might decide it's not worth it. So
Oh, I don't think they're going to decide that it's not worth it.
and certain states are questioning that.
I think people need to just, what you already know to be the value, I think my encouragement to you is to show the value. Because there is value in it. So my advice would be not to worry that they're asking the question, but be excited to give the answer. You've got the answer. Give the answer. And that stops the asking of questions. Like, I am a very, very staunch, advocate for showcasing the value of higher education. Let's tell them about the return on investment. We know there is a return on investment. Let's just show it. And so that's how you get, in my opinion, ahead of that conversation.
Beverly Lindsay, University of California, multi-campus. My question is an extension of the previous questioner. Since you were actually in two administrations, Obama and Biden, what were some of the main challenges you encountered from Capitol Hill?
So I was in Bush as a career staffer and Biden as a political staffer. And these were significantly different time periods, okay? And when I was in the Bush administration, that was, my last day in the job was the day that the Higher Education Act was passed. That was 2008. Now, fast forward to 2023. I can't tell you when the next Higher Education Act is going to get reauthorized. I have no idea. I don't think they know. And Capitol Hill functions very differently than how it functioned in 2008. Certainly there were Democrats then and Republicans and independents, but I saw a little bit more collaboration across party lines than what I see now. And as you saw play out yourselves on TV, there's not even collaboration in party lines. So it makes things a little bit more difficult to get through. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying. And that's what I want folks to remember. I think sometimes we get really upset about the politics of all of it and some of the backfighting and the backbiting kinds of things. But we should not take our eye off the ball because the federal government continues to be a major financial investor in post-secondary education. So whether that means you continue to advocate for change through speaking with people of influence in your own communities, you might want to do that. You have an association who's advocating for various policies that will help students at the federal level and at the state level. You use that bully pulpit. We have to keep our eyes on the ball and not, I think one of my survival strategies is I just try to stay focused on the students and the issues, and I stay out of politics. I won't say bad words tonight, but I don't care about politics. I was going to say something else, but I don't care. I really think we've got to stay focused on the students. Now, we got to be aware of politics. You can't act like we're operating absent of that. But I still go to Capitol Hill. I still meet with Republicans. I still meet with Democrats. You know, depending on the issues, I might have to take a Tylenol after some of those meetings. But I still go because we have to stay committed to ensuring that the resources that our students need, whether it's basic needs support, whether it's Pell Grant increases, whether it's, you know, a variety of other things, we gotta stay in the fight. And we can't let the noise derail us too much. But it is upsetting. It is upsetting, it's annoying, but we've gotta stay in the fight.
Thank you.